morning and welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting a standard for accountability and responsibility, ownership of your choices, and being able to respond to those choices. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. Over the next few weekends, as a nice little tribute to Mother's Day during the month of May, I'm going to broadcast an interview that I did with Joann, is her name, JoJo, and her daughter Jenny is a part of that interview at some point. And the reason why I like doing this is because I think when we're able to hear in real terms, I mean, we see things that I've done clips and things, but when we're talking to somebody directly and we can walk back the history of their choices in life, we can really see where they're being accountable, where they're being responsible, and we can also see where they're not being responsible or accountable, and the other dynamics that come into play with that. So here is part one of this interview for the month of May. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there. And I hope you enjoy this. I hope you find something useful out of it. And I would also like to encourage anybody out there, if you feel brave enough and you want to do an interview with me, I would really welcome it. I think these are really interesting and fun, and I'm absolutely willing to do, a back and forth if people want to ask me questions as I'm asking them questions. So I think it's always useful to hear what people have to say in their journey. All right, JoJo, this is your life. Welcome to Iconic Freedom. This is the formula. We are setting a standard for accountability and responsibility, owning our choices and being accountable for those choices. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. So we have a special guests actually, on the podcast for today and for the month of May, actually. And what we're going to do is we're going to explore the life of JoJo, and
oh boy,
and we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to get some answers about some fun things. She has a remarkable life, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing about it. And her daughter is here. One of her daughters is here, Jenny. And Jenny is going to join us at some point as well, and we'll field a few questions her way to see how her life has evolved from the life that she has learned and understood from her mom and the way her mom has conducted her life. So, JoJo, welcome.
Thank you.
So I got a little bit of your introduction. You are retired now,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
And you've been retired for how long?
About 13 years now.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yes.
And you've been living in Ohio prior to being here?
Yes. Well, I live, and now I'm half in Ohio and half out here in Scottsdale.
Okay.
I go back and forth.
Okay. And you've been doing that for a number of years,
For the 13 years that I've been doing this.
Wow, that's amazing. No wonder she bought a house here. Okay. This makes sense to me. So in terms of, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Garfield Heights.
Just move a little bit closer to the mic.
Garfield Heights.
There you go. Okay. And where is Garfield Heights?
That's in Ohio. It's about 20 minutes from downtown Cleveland.
Oh, okay. So I've been to Cleveland, the flats out there and everything. I'm kind of familiar with that. That's kind of cool. So tell me then, do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother who I've not seen since we were little.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Well, my mother died when she was 32. I was just a creepy crawler at that time when she passed away, and the family just all split up. My father took off, left us, and my grandparents, my mother's parents, raised me, and then later on, a few years later, they took my brother in.
Oh,
so
wow.
My grandparents are the ones that raised us.
Wow. Okay. And so, and then what led to the two of you not seeing each other all this time?
When my mother died, my grandparents took me in, but my father wanted my brother, and the brother and my father didn't get along, and so then after a few years, my brother asked my grandparents if he could come and live with us And they said, of course, yes. And so we were raised by my grandparents.
And then when did he leave home?
He left home probably 19, 20 years old.
Oh, okay.
He stayed with my grandparents for a lot, because by that time my grandparents were pretty old and they needed help. And so he would help around the house and take care of things around the house.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And what year do you think this was?
Oh, geez.
Approximately.
Maybe in the 60s,
In the 60s?
I think.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. Okay, now is he an older brother or younger?
He's 2 years younger than me.
He's 2 years younger than you. Okay. And so then when did you leave home?
Oh, I left home. Well, when my mother passed, my grandparents took me then, and I was just a
Right.
couple years old then, and they took care of me, and I stayed with my grandparents until I got to about 20 years old, and then went out on my own.
And when you went out on your own, what were you doing for a job?
I worked as a hostess at Johnny Garno's. It was a Johnny Garno's smorgasbord in Brecksville, Ohio.
Oh, wow.
And I was the hostess with the mostest.
Nice.
That's what they used to call me all the time, the hostess with the mostest.
Sweet.
And that's where I met my husband, Jack
Ah.
Picar. And all the waitresses at that restaurant said, "Oh, Joann, this is the one you got to grab and hold on to," and blah, blah, blah. And so I did. And we got married, and then shortly, about 2 years later, we had my daughter, Jackie.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you have 2 children, correct?
2 children, 2 girls.
Right. So Jackie is the oldest and then Jenny.
Right, yes.
And so, okay, so that's funny, Jackie, okay.
Yes. And we're all JPs. Jackie Picar, Jenny Picar, Joann Picar, and Jack Picar.
Nice.
Without being gingerly Jack.
Okay, so monograms are easy in this family.
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
so that's kind of sweet. So then, so he worked at the restaurant. What did he do at the restaurant?
He was a bartender. He was
Oh.
actually a math teacher at the Brecksville school system and football coach.
Oh,
And he highlighted on the weekends bartending at the service bar.
oh wow.
And that's
okay.
how we met. And the waitresses there all said, "Oh, Joann, you got to grab this one. You got to grab this one." And
Okay, so he basically moonlights at the bar
Yes,
on the
he
weekends, but otherwise he was a teacher.
yes, he was a math teacher.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
And so then how long did he do that for?
Oh, we were both there for about a year or 2 years.
Okay. And then tell me a little bit about the evolution of your relationship.
Well, then we started seeing each other, and he started inviting me to the football games that he coached and that.
Nice.
And one thing led to another, and we got married, and then we had Jackie.
And then how long after that you had Jenny?
2 years later.
2
They're 2
years
years
later.
apart.
Okay. And at that point, were you still living in the same area?
No, at that time, well, we were living in Brecksville then, when the girls were. We bought a house in Brecksville on Snowville Road, and it was 4 acres, 5 acres, someplace in there, and it had a stream going through the backyard. It was really, really
Wow.
nice. Yeah, it was a very nice area. And we were there for a long time. Yeah, about 10 years or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so during that time, I mean, it's kind of interesting. So your father was still alive,
Yes.
but you did not have a
There
relationship?
was no relationship. Once my mother died, I never saw my father again
Oh, wow.
until the day of my wedding. And
Wow.
when we came out of the church, he was there with his new wife or girlfriend or whatever. I don't know who she was. And he wanted to get together, and I said, "You're too late."
Oh.
I mean, I was in my 20s. Did I really, he never, from the time that my mother died, and when my mother was dying, when she was real sick, bedridden, we never heard from him.
Oh, wow.
So,
Really?
no, we never heard from him, because once she was taken out of the hospital to my grandmother's house, and my grandmother and grandfather took care of her, and then I wanted to live with my grandparents because I wanted to be with my mom.
Sure.
And so they took me in too.
Wow.
And that was it. Hmm.
So, but the brother stayed with your dad,
He stayed with my dad for
Which is kinda
Dad
interesting.
remarried,
right?
and the stepmother and him didn't get along.
Oh,
And so the brother decided to
he
come.
wanted to live with you guys.
Yes. So he came to live with
okay.
us, and he stayed. We both stayed there until we went out on our own.
Okay, so that's a pretty interesting dynamic, though. That stepmom comes into the picture, and suddenly they're not getting along. And do you think that, or do you know from the conversations, if you recall any during that time with your brother, that it was his idea to leave or her idea for him to leave?
It was my brother's idea to leave.
Okay, so he just felt
he said that was it for him.
He just didn't need to be there anymore.
No.
Yeah. So
and my
took off.
grandparents were getting older, and my brother was helping my grandfather with stuff around the house because we were in a suburban area where they had a lot of backyard and all yard work and stuff to do. So then my brother said, "No, Grandpa's too old to be doing this stuff," and he said, so he came and moved in and took care of stuff.
So kind of interesting. So I don't want to be scandalous, but now, did you have Jackie before you got married?
No,
You got married and then you had your
2
children.
years after I was married.
Okay, so I was trying to get that timeline correct in my head. So, because it would have been scandalous back then, right?
Oh, yeah, boy, it would have been. Now nobody says it or thinks anything of it.
Yeah,
but
right?
back then, the mouths were flying, But
or like in the case, I think of, I can't remember, I think it was my dad. One of his siblings or family members or something got sent away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. When and then I think she had her baby, and then she came back and like, well, that's shocking.
Oh, that's right, because it was scandalous back then. You didn't do things like.
Well, my mother. So it turns out my mother was divorced when she met my dad, and she'd already had a daughter. Oh. But the family down in New Orleans, again, scandalous. Yeah. Nobody wanted to talk about that, so they tried to say that my mom was a war widow.
Oh.
And my mom's like, I would have been like 14 years old. It's just like, I don't even think that's possible.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, because everything back then was very crazy that way, right? People, they just didn't want to talk about things. And
no.
Okay, so then your dad shows up at your wedding. That's pretty fascinating.
With his new wife.
And he didn't come inside, and he didn't walk you down the aisle.
No.
Did the grandfather walk you down the aisle?
Yes.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting moment.
Yes, it was very interesting.
Tell me a little more about that.
Well, it was a shocker when I came out of the church, and there he was. And his wife was saying, "Oh, your father wants, to get together and blah, blah." And I just looked at her. I didn't say anything. And then he was handing me a card. And I went put my hand up and said, "No, I don't need your card now. It's too late."
And so that's an interesting moment. And so do you recall anything more about that moment, or just in retrospect now about what you were thinking at that time?
When my mother was at my grandparents' house and they were taking care of her, we were getting phone calls from women looking for him.
For your dad?
Yes.
Oh.
And so it triggered something in my brain that I didn't want anything to do with him, because my mother was lying in the room next to me, and I'm getting phone calls from all these women asking me where my father is, that I'm pregnant and I'm looking for I need him. I'm going in to deliver this baby. And I just hung up the phone. So when he showed up at the church on my wedding day, I couldn't even look at him.
So, I mean, okay, so I don't know if you remember this or not, but how many of these women were calling?
Well, there was several of them.
Several?
Several.
Wow.
He had a trucking company, his own trucking company, and he was an out-of-state driver.
Oh, boy.
And Kroger's at that time was his biggest contract.
Right.
And I guess he did whatever he did on the road, I don't know.
Wow.
I've not spoken to him or seen him or anything. Once my mother moved in with my grandparents, that was it. I never heard.
So is your father still alive, to your knowledge? You have no idea.
Not.
No, he's not.
No, he's not, because I did get a call I was working at UBS, and I got a phone call from an attorney saying that he had died. And he was on a slab at the morgue, and they wanted me to come and claim the body and give her a burial.
Where was the
Someplace
wife?
in Cleveland.
So they
The
divorced.
wife, I don't know. Evidently, either she died or they divorced or what, I don't know.
So she was MIA at that point.
I have no idea how
Wow.
long he was married or anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That was-
amazing.
I was shocked when I picked up that phone and they told me that this is an attorney representing your late father.
Wow.
Well, I said, thank you very much. Have a nice day. And that's exactly what I did, too. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
They wanted me to claim the body because they didn't know what to do with the body. So do whatever you do with bodies.
Sure. Yeah.
He's nothing to me.
Right.
I mean, he left us.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Okay. So then, did he ever? I guess he officially divorced your mom at some point.
No, because she died. He didn't have to.
Oh, that's right. Duh.
Yeah,
Okay.
she died. She died of memory.
I wasn't sure if he had done that when she left.
No.
That they got divorced, or it was just because she died.
Yeah.
So the fact that she had passed away, but before all of that, he was doing all of
He
his
was doing all that,
tomfoolery
yes.
in all of these
Yes.
different states.
Yes.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if what
Yeah.
that dynamic was. That's pretty fascinating.
Yes.
Okay, so holy cabooses. Okay, so. And so then your brother, what created the distance between you and your brother that you don't speak?
Well,
And do you know if he's still alive?
I don't know.
Okay,
He stayed with my father because he was a boy.
sure.
And so he stayed with them. But then a couple of years later, when he saw what he was really like, he called and wanted to know if he could come and stay. And at that time, my grandfather was in poor health. And I said, yes, get over here because you can take care, because we had a big plot of land in Independence and all that yard work and housework and everything. So my brother moved in then at that time and he took charge.
Got it. Interesting. And then how long did your grandfather
He
live beyond that?
He lived maybe 5 years after that. He was
Okay.
he was in really bad shape when he did pass.
And then what about your grandmother? How
My
long?
grandmother died way before that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, shortly after your mom?
Yeah, shortly after my mom.
And what did your...
She had a heart attack and
She had a heart attack?
yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. So then here we are on wedding day. Card coming your way. No, thank you. See you later. Bye.
That's
you got to
right.
go.
That's right.
Here's your
Exactly.
hat. What's your hurry?
See ya.
I wouldn't want to be ya.
That's right.
And pretty interesting because in relation to this podcast, the theme of this podcast and what we talk about, accountability and responsibility. So when we say accountability, we're saying you own your choices in life.
Right.
Every single choice in
Right.
life. And that you have to be able to respond to the choice.
Exactly.
Whatever it is, right? Do no harm to others.
Right.
So just at this first juncture of your life, which a lot happened up until that point, but with your dad, what are your thoughts about that? If you were filtering it through this particular prism.
Well, I don't know what to say about that because we had no relationship.
Right.
Because when I was young, my mother had multiple sclerosis for several years before she died. And he owned his trucking. My grandparents actually gave him the money for his trucking company.
Wow.
And he took off.
Right.
So we didn't see him. And then then I saw him at my wedding day. And he never showed up for my mother's funeral or my grandmother's or anybody's. And then shortly thereafter, he died. And when he died, the lawyer handling his estate called me and wanted me to claim his body because they couldn't
Right.
bury him. He
Sure.
was whatever. And I don't want to tell you what I told the lawyer.
You should go ahead. Go ahead. It's okay. People have said worse on this podcast. Go ahead.
I told him to stick it up or
No.
Stick it up your ass, buddy.
There you go.
I am not going to
See,
give
that's tame compared to what we hear.
I would give you one pet, not one red set.
So if I was going to evaluate this from what I'm, my thought process of it is, a huge lack of accountability.
Right.
Really just, and not paying attention to the responsibility of his kids, his wife.
Right.
You got married back then. It was for better or for worse, and sickness and health.
Right.
And here he is off gallivanting around and all the rest of that. So then you get married to Jack.
Right.
And then how long are you married to Jack? You have 2 kids with Jack, and fast forward, what is that?
We were married about 10 years.
10 years.
About 10 years.
And what ended that relationship? So that is the end of part 1. I just think it's amazing when you start listening to this that you're hearing, in real time, with somebody's life, of course, the level of irresponsibility and the level of responsibility. The irresponsibility with her dad making decisions that he was out gallivanting around and multiple women and all kinds of tomfoolery that's going on, and how it impacted and shaped her life and shaped her brother's life. Pretty fascinating stuff, and you'll hear more of that as we get into more of the interview. And what I think you'll also hear is how fascinating it was that she became so incredibly successful. It's really a great story, and I hope you find it inspiring. That music means that we are out of time for this weekend. Thank you for joining me. Please share this with your family and friends. Hit that like button if you would. Subscribe to the podcast if you're interested, and check out my book on lulu.com. I will see you here next week for part 2 of JoJo, This Is Your Life. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.